Hey everybody, welcome back to our second week of Courageous Conversations. This week, Shelly and I are going to be talking about respectful conversations with disrespectful or disruptive employees. So thank you so much for joining us. To kick us off here with the first question, Shelly, having a respectful conversation with a disrespectful or disruptive employee, right? I think we've all been there, from our very first conversation to maybe more seasoned folks. How do you prepare yourself for something like that, for those conversations?
Okay. Well, certainly it's a courageous conversation, whether it's your first one or your 50th or your 550th. What I can say about those conversations is definitely come to those conversations if you can plan them. They're not always planned, but if you can plan them, make sure that you have some talking points. Stick to the facts when you are talking on those talking points. A lot of times we like to come to those conversations a little bit emotionally charged on both sides. Maybe you're just really fed up or frustrated with that person and you just are irritated that you even have to have this conversation. Maybe it's the same conversation that you've had a lot of times with this person, or maybe it's the first one. But a lot of the times I've noticed that there's a frustration that's behind that as the person that's facilitating those conversations. So by all means, keep your cool, keep calm, and leave your emotions at the door if you can. The best way I know how to do that is just to find the right setting, a neutral setting. Maybe it's away from your office in a conference room. That's been helpful to at least clear the air and keep things on a more neutral level for both sides. And then also, when you're having those conversations, be sure that you're being consistent and positive. It's hard to stay positive in those kind of conversations, but you really have to take the positive spin. And the reason why you want to take that positive spin with folks is because you're looking to find a solution to the problem, not to just talk about the problem and chew on it some more. You're looking for the solution. And when you have a positive goal in mind, most people are on board to want to make that happen. So Jenna, I have a question for you. When we have these courageous conversations, and maybe we take them off to a different room and visit with folks, should I have another member of management or HR join in on these conversations? What's your thoughts on that?
I think obviously as a manager or supervisor, you probably know your employee best. I think sometimes some employees do better with less audience, right? Because I feel like sometimes they feel like it's threatening to them and you're just going to agitate that person or escalate the situation. Now, on the other hand, if you feel like they do become threatened very easily and they maybe turn or twist words or possibly interpret things differently than what you're saying, absolutely bring in somebody from HR or another neutral manager. Typically, I would say this person isn't doing a lot of the talking, but they are doing the documentation piece for it. So I touched on this a little bit, Shelly. I think sometimes we fear these conversations with the disrespectful or disruptive employee because we fear they're just going to leap off the deep end, which happens a very small percentage of the time when you actually say this. But when that small percentage of the time does happen and they, go off the deep end and they yell or become threatening or combative, those kinds of things, what do you do? What do you say in those situations? How do you handle that?
Okay, so to be courageous in this, I wouldn't recommend yelling at them to get the hell out of here. It's not going to work. We really don't want to do that. Fighting fire with fire doesn't work. But what does work, and you and I have both either read or listened to this book by Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. He talks about using tactical empathy. And to explain tactical empathy, it really is a deliberate influencing of your counterparts, the other person's emotions, but not being manipulative about it when you're having these conversations with them. So in good faith, you're having a genuine conversation with this person and you're going to try to magnify positive emotions, even when they go off the deep end. So something really impactful in a conversation like that might go like, good, I see you're having a really emotionally charged reaction. This is good. I want to hear more. What drives you to be this emotional about it? Because when somebody's emotional about something, they're actually invested. So we have to take that spin on it and know that they're invested in something enough to be emotional about it. And this is your turn to start doing some active listening and figure out what it is that's making them this way and how you can work together to turn it around.
Good advice.
So Jenna, how do you keep your cool when talking to disrespectful or disruptive employees? Because sometimes it's not always easy.
So one thing that I have always said from when I first started is, you know what, I didn't cause this. You know, this isn't, I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't really, you know, it wasn't my fault kind of a thing. So I'm not taking it personally. Now, recent seminar that I went to, and you all probably have heard this before, and I'm the only one living under a rock here, but I heard the term Q-tip. QTIP, quit taking it personal, right? So not only does the person having the conversation and bringing these courageous conversations up have to realize this isn't you, this doesn't have anything to do with you, but you're bringing this behavior, you're bringing that communication type to their attention. So don't take it personal when they either fly off the deep end or don't agree with you. One thing that I think is, I just think it's a really funny analogy, really, just this Q-tip, quit taking it personal, because actually when you're having a conversation where you have to remind yourself not to take it personal, you have to realize that who you're talking to is taking it personal. And so piggybacking on what you just said about never split the difference, and that whole concept is, you know, you're needing to say it in a way that they don't take it personally either. Like, be on their side about it and use that positive reinforcement to be like, hey, I don't know if you know this, but when you act like this or you say things like that, this is how others are interpreting it. I don't know if you knew that, but just so we're all on the same page.
For sure.
Yeah. So one thing about disrespectful or disruptive employees, Shelly, is they end up like stealing the show a lot of the time. And I feel like sometimes as HR or supervisors, you're at the point where you're like, I could talk to this person every single day. But tell us why you think it's important to continue to address those types of behaviors, Shelly.
Okay, so first of all, we talked about being consistent with everything in our communications with disruptive people. And really, what this shows is that you are committed to finding a solution to this. Eventually, we're probably not going to continue talking about the same thing and chewing those same things over and over again without coming to some sort of resolution. But it also shows those high performers, the ones that aren't being disruptive, that I validate what you're doing. I see what you're doing over there, and I know that this is a disruption to you. I respect you in your role enough to have this conversation or ongoing conversations with somebody that is disruptive. This isn't something that we're going to tolerate from anyone, and we want to move past this and help you get set up for success, because that really is, in our management and leadership roles, I think that's our ultimate goal, is to set our teams up for success, and whatever it takes to get them to that point. And if it takes you having those courageous conversations with those disruptors, you're going to have to do that. So Jenna, in your experience, have you noticed that these types of conversations that I talk about, are they a one and done kind of thing most of the time, or do they require routine follow-up? And then at what point do we take action, and what kind of action do we need to take?
I think that's a very loaded question, Shelly. But yeah, I think obviously it depends on the situation, but some folks are just more emotional than others. It's just kind of a natural thing. And so, yeah, you probably are going to be having ongoing discussions with those, you know, one-off folks that require that consistent feedback or communication with them. And you're right, I think you just touched on this a little bit ago, but it's not going to be the same conversation every time, but you're going to need to have consistent conversations with folks like that. So the discussion might evolve or regress at certain times, but just having that consistent communication piece with them reinforces the fact that, hey, I am watching, I am listening, I do understand what you're going through, and we do need to address these things, because once you don't, it's kind of like you give someone an inch, they take a mile, sort of a thing. So you don't want problems to fester, not only with that employee, but like you touched on in the last question too, with the other high performers. You don't want them to become now demotivated because this person is getting away with something that they would be held to a higher standard for.
Sounds good. Well, that's all I had for questions for you today. Do you have any other questions for me on courageous conversations with disrespectful and disruptive employees?
I don't have any other ones, but this was another fun discussion with you, so thank you so much.
Thank you. And we look forward to joining up again next week or next time around. And hopefully we get some really great questions that come in from the folks that are tuning in too. We can help answer any courageous conversation that you might have. You either want, I don't know, validation that you're doing the right thing, or maybe some not so legal advice from some HR people.
That sounds good. Yeah, if you guys have any questions, feel free to email Shelly or I, and we can incorporate them anonymously moving forward.
Thanks.
Have a good day.
You too.